Korean Mafia boss was served a spiked drink. The ice wasn't melting right. That was the first thing she noticed. She had 40 seconds to stop a murder. She spent the first 3 deciding if it was worth it. The amber liquid caught the gold light above the table like it was innocent, like it wasn't carrying something that could stop a heart before the warmth even reached the back of a man's throat. Irie had clocked the meniscus on that glass 11 minutes ago when the tray came back from the bar. 2 glasses out of 14 sitting differently. Surface tension fractionally altered, the signature of something soluble added after the pour. Something that didn't announce itself in color or scent. Something that didn't slow a man down. Something that stopped him. 37 seconds now. Kang Ho Shin reached for the glass. His fingers ringed, unhurried, waited with the specific confidence of a man who had never once sat in a room, and considered that it might be his last, wrapped around the base with the ease of someone ordering the world to hold still. The room held still. It always did around him. The private room held 11 people, and enough compressed violence to level a city block. Ruben Casello sat across the table with 6 men who all moved the way people moved when they'd been professionally dangerous long enough to make it look like stillness. Kang Ho's 2 security personnel sat at the room's edge, present but distanced, the way bodyguards positioned themselves when their principal wanted the performance of privacy. Nobody was watching the bar. Nobody ever watched the bar. That was the whole architecture of it. 25 seconds. Irie set her jaw. She picked up the second glass, clean, consistent meniscus, nothing added, nothing altered, and walked into that room like she had been born to move through it. Her grandmother's voice arrived without permission. Character is what you do when everyone watching would forgive you for doing nothing. 15 seconds. She reached the table. Her left hand came forward with the clean glass in a smooth bartender's redirect, the kind of practiced motion that read as correction, not interruption, and her right hand caught the first glass by the rim just as Kang Ho's fingers released it. One beat, fluid, invisible to anyone not looking for it. My apologies, Mr. Shin. Chip in the glass. House standard, we don't serve imperfection at Velour. The room did not react. Kang Ho looked at her. Not the look a man gives a bartender. The look a man gives something that has just moved in a way that doesn't fit the map he carries of the room. His eyes didn't widen. They narrowed, fractionally, precisely, the way a lens adjusts to bring something distant into sharp focus. He picked up the new glass, drank. Behind her, from the direction of the bar, Irie felt the weight of a specific silence. The silence of a person processing failure and rotating toward its cause. She did not turn around. Kang Ho set his glass down slowly. His ringed fingers stayed on it a moment longer than necessary. "What is your name?" he asked quietly. "Irie," she said. "Irie Thorne." He nodded once, the kind of nod that meant something had been decided somewhere she couldn't see. "Don't go far tonight." The jazz kept playing. The ice kept melting. And somewhere in that room, a plan that had taken weeks to build was already being replaced with a new one. 6 weeks earlier, Irie Thorne had no reason to know what velour was. She was 29 years old, extraordinary at a job she never planned to have, and carrying $63,000 in student loan debt from a biochemistry degree that currently served her in exactly one professional capacity. She knew what was in a drink before most people knew they'd been affected by it. The plan had been toxicology, graduate program, research fellowship, a career built inside a laboratory where the variables stayed where you put them. Then the funding collapsed. Not gradually, abruptly, mid-semester, with the specific administrative language that translated cleanly into, "The decision has already been made, and this conversation is a formality." She had asked questions. She had received answers that were technically accurate and structurally hollow. She had bent, the way her grandmother always said sugarcane bent in a storm, and taken a bar job at a midtown hotel to keep her apartment. Turned out, she was extraordinary at it. Within 2 years, she was one of the most requested mixologists in the city. A chemist's precision with ratios, a performer's sense of timing. and an almost unsettling ability to read a person's interior, whether before they open their mouths, the micro-expressions, the grip tension, the way a body held itself differently when someone was lying versus when they were simply afraid. She had cataloged this skill as useful. She had not yet understood that it was dangerous. Di-Young Pyo found her at a citywide cocktail competition on a Thursday evening in October. He stood at the back of the judging area and watched her work for 45 minutes. No approach, no expression, no phone. Just watching with the patience of a man who already knew how the conversation would end. When she finished, he moved through the room, handed her a card with nothing on it but a 10-digit number, and said, "You don't look at your hands when you pour. You look at the person. That's rare. We have an opening." "What's the establishment?" she asked. "Velour," he said. She didn't know the name. She would later understand this was by design. That velour existed precisely in the space between known and invisible, sustained entirely by the discretion of the people inside it. The salary he quoted made her loan balance feel like a rounding error. She said yes before he finished the sentence. What she did not ask, what she would spend the next 6 weeks wishing she had thought to ask, was why, exactly, an establishment like Velour needed someone who watched people instead of glasses. The answer was already in motion. She just hadn't been told her part yet. There are people who walk into a room. And then there are people who change a room just by entering it. Kang Ho-shin was the second kind. Irie had been behind the bar at Velour for exactly 3 Thursdays before she fully understood what she was looking at. The first Thursday, she clocked his table. The second, she clocked his patterns. The third, she stopped telling herself she was simply being professional and admitted the truth. She was studying him. The way she used to study compounds under controlled conditions. Quietly, without interference, noting every variable. He was 51 years old. Silver-streaked hair, close on the sides, longer on top, not styled for fashion, just maintained for precision. He stood 6 feet even, which shouldn't have felt imposing. It did anyway. His suits carried no logos, no shine, no statement. Just fabric cut so well it communicated one thing only: I stopped needing to prove anything a long time ago. He arrived every Thursday at exactly 9 p.m. Same table. Same drink, a 12-year scotch, 2 ice spheres, no garnish, no deviation. He brought 2 associates and 2 security personnel who positioned themselves at a distance that said privacy, but close enough to say don't. He never raised his voice. He never needed to. Irie had tended bar for men with power before. Politicians, executives, celebrities who confused fame with authority. She knew what performed power looked like: the loud laugh, the deliberate name-dropping, the way insecure men took up space to remind the room they existed. Kang Ho-shin took up no space at all. He simply made the space around him rearrange itself. On the 4th Thursday, he spoke to her directly for the first time. She had just set his scotch down, 2 ice spheres, precise, and was turning back toward the bar when his voice reached her. Quiet, unhurried, the tone of a man who had never once in his life repeated himself. "You studied something before this." Not a question. A statement delivered with the confidence of someone reading a file they had already reviewed. She turned back. Biochemistry. Something moved in his expression. Small, controlled. The way a door opens exactly 1 inch to let in light without revealing what's behind it. "Waste," he said. Then he turned back to his associates, like the conversation had reached its natural conclusion. Irie returned to the bar. She replayed the exchange 3 times in 60 seconds, turning it over the way she used to turn over an anomalous result, searching for what it actually meant beneath what it appeared to say. He hadn't been insulting her. He had been noting a discrepancy. The way a precise man notes anything that doesn't add up, not with judgment, but with the quiet, persistent attention of someone who files things away and returns to them later. She didn't know it yet, but he had already started a file on her. He said waste, and half of you heard an insult. The other half heard something else entirely. Drop in the comments which one you heard, because your answer says everything about how well you read people. The shift happened on a Tuesday. Not a Thursday. That was the first wrong thing. De-Young found Ireie before her shift began, and everything about him was slightly off. The way a painting hangs crooked by just enough degrees that you feel it before you see it. His jaw was set. His hands were still, but too deliberately still, the way a person holds themselves when stillness is an active choice rather than a natural state. "Mr. Shin will be coming in tonight," he said. "Negotiation dinner, private room, you're on primary service." "Understood," Ireie said. "Anything specific I should know?" He paused, 1 second too long. "Be precise tonight, more than usual." He walked away before she could form another question. Ireie stood there a moment, turning those 5 words over in her mind. More than usual. From De-Young, a man who communicated in complete, unambiguous sentences, that phrase was not casual instruction. It was a warning delivered in the only language he allowed himself. She filed it. She went to work. The private room held 11 people by 9:30 p.m. Kang Ho's side of the table, 4, including himself. Composed, calibrated, the posture of men who had negotiated in dangerous rooms long enough to wear patience like a second skin. The opposing side, 6, led by a man named Ruben Casello. Gray suit, compact frame, introduced as a logistics consultant. He had the kind of stillness that didn't come from calm. It came from discipline. The specific discipline of someone who had been professionally dangerous for long enough that violence had stopped feeling like an event and started feeling like a language. Every instinct Ireie had pointed directly at Ruben Casello. She watched him. She tracked him. She built a map of his sightlines and his micro-movements from behind the bar with the focused attention of someone who knew that the most dangerous person in a room was the one who moved the least. She was so focused on Casello that she almost missed the 11th person entirely. Sung-Min Baek, younger, peripheral, seated at the edge of Kang Ho's side with the body language of someone who wanted to appear present while staying positioned to move unnoticed. He glanced at the bar once. Just once. But it was the kind of glance that answered a question, and Ireie hadn't even known there was a question until she saw it. She just didn't know yet what the answer meant. She almost missed it. That was the part that would stay with her long after everything else faded. Not the danger, not the decision, not even the 3 seconds that changed everything. Just the quiet, ordinary fact that she almost walked right past it. The dinner service had been running 40 minutes when Sung-Min Baek pushed back from the table. Not dramatically, not with urgency, just a man excusing himself from a conversation, casual, unremarkable, the kind of movement that registered in a busy room as background noise. He crossed toward the bar during a lull, while Kang Ho was locked in a side conversation with one of his associates, attention fully occupied, eyes pointed away from the room. The timing was not accidental. Ireie was restocking the far end of the bar when Sung-Min reached Petra, the other bartender on service that night. She didn't hear what he said. The room was too loud, and he was too careful with his volume, his body angled just enough to create a wall between his mouth and the rest of the space. But she watched Petra's hands. That was the habit she had never been able to turn off, the one that made her extraordinary behind a bar and had made her dangerous inside a laboratory. She didn't watch faces. Faces were trained. Faces performed. Hands told the truth. Petra's hands hesitated. Not long, not visibly, to anyone who wasn't specifically watching for it. Just a fraction, a single break in the fluid sequence of her pour, a momentary interruption in the muscle memory of someone who had done this 10,000 times. Her body angled away from the room as her wrists moved. Her shoulders dropped a degree. Something in Ireie's chest went very quiet. When Petra stepped away to handle a floor request, Ireie moved to the tray. 14 glasses. She scanned them the way she used to scan results in a laboratory, systematically, without assumption, letting the data speak before the interpretation arrived. 12 were consistent in every measurable way. Light refraction through the crystal, meniscus level, surface behavior of the liquid. 2 were not. The surface tension sat at a marginally different angle. The kind of difference that lived below the threshold of casual observation, invisible to someone who hadn't spent 3 semesters studying how dissolved compounds altered the physical behavior of liquids in controlled conditions. Something soluble, something added after the pour, something engineered not to announce itself in color, scent, or taste. Irie ran the surface tension pattern against everything she remembered from her graduate coursework in the space of 4 seconds. This was not a sedative. Sedatives altered surface tension gently, a gradual, low-density disruption. What she was looking at had a tighter, more concentrated signature. The kind of compound designed to work fast, work completely, and leave a body that looked, to anyone without a toxicology background, like it had simply stopped. Both altered glasses sat on the same side of the tray. Kang-ho sighed. She had 30 seconds, maybe less. And somewhere beneath every calculation, beneath the fear that was wrapping itself around her spine like wire, her grandmother's voice. Character is what you do when everyone watching would forgive you for doing nothing. She picked up the tray. She almost walked past it. Almost. The one skill they tried to take from her when they collapsed her funding. That same skill just became the only thing standing between a man and a body bag. If this story found you at the right time, subscribe. Because what's coming next will make you question everyone you've ever trusted. 30 seconds was not a lot of time. Irie had once run a full compound analysis in 4 minutes flat and got a standing ovation from her graduate supervisor. She had once talked a blackout-drunk hedge fund manager off a 4th-floor balcony in under 2 minutes using nothing but measured tone and strategic misdirection. 30 seconds felt like nothing. She moved through the room with the tray balanced in both hands, her pace unhurried, her face carrying the specific neutral expression that good service staff wore like a uniform, present but invisible, attentive but unreadable. The expression that told a room full of dangerous men, I am furniture. I am function. I am not a variable. Her mind was running at an entirely different speed. She cataloged the room in a single pass. Casello's side, 6 men, 3 with visible tension in the jaw and shoulder, one whose right hand had not moved from his lap since the dinner began. Kang-ho's security at the room's edge, positioned correctly, attention distributed, nothing yet registering as wrong. Jin-soo, Kang-ho's lead man, 11 years in his service, standing 4 feet to Kang-ho's left, checked his watch. Irie noted it, filed it, kept moving. Kang-ho himself sat at the head of the table with the unhurried composure of a man who had never once been given a reason to believe his own circle could be turned against him. His glass was 3 inches from his right hand. His associate was mid-sentence. His attention was exactly where the timing required it to be. Away from the bar, away from the tray, away from Irie. 20 seconds. She ran the final calculation with the cold precision of someone who had long ago learned to separate what she felt from what she needed to do. Option 1, warn him directly. 4 words, low voice, fast delivery. Risk, Jin-soo was 4 feet away. If he was involved, the warning never landed. Option 2, redirect the glass. 1 fluid motion. Absorb whatever came after. Option 2 had no clean exit. Option 2 was the only one that worked. 15 seconds. She adjusted her grip on the tray. She thought about the surface tension in that glass, tight, concentrated, final. She thought about her grandmother. She stopped thinking. She was almost at the table when she saw it. Jin-soo checked his watch. Once, she let it pass men checked their watches. It meant nothing on its own. But her brain flagged it the way it flagged every anomaly, quietly, without drama, dropping it into a running column of data she hadn't yet named. She took 3 more steps toward the table. Jin-soo checked his watch again. Irie's feet kept moving. Her face stayed neutral. But something behind her eyes went absolutely still, the specific stillness of a scientist watching an experiment produce a result that doesn't match the hypothesis. Not panic, not confusion. Recognition. She counted the seconds. 11 elapsed before his wrist came up a third time. 3 times in 60 seconds. She had a cousin who did that, checked his watch in rapid succession whenever he was waiting on something he couldn't control. A nervous habit, her aunt used to say. Irie had spent enough time in high-stakes environments to know it wasn't nerves. It was countdown management. The body's way of tracking time when time was the only variable left outside your control. Jin-soo was not checking the hour. He was checking how much of the plan remained. Irie ran the geometry of the room in a single breath. Jin-soo had worked beside Kang-ho for 11 years. He knew every schedule rotation, every security gap, every entrance and exit in this building. He knew which nights the private room ran light on staff. He knew which bartender worked which section. He would have known exactly how to move a conversation toward a particular person at a particular bar. The picture assembled itself with a speed and clarity that made her stomach drop. Sung-min hadn't built this. Sung-min was too new, too eager, too visibly ambitious for a job that required patience and access. He was the hand that delivered the instruction, not the mind that wrote it. Someone with longer history, deeper access, and enough trust to never be suspected had pointed him at Petra and told him exactly what to ask for. Someone who had been standing 4 feet from Kang-ho every Thursday for 11 years. Someone who knew that the most protected man in the room would never look for the threat at his own shoulder. The tray was still in Irie's hands. She kept walking. 10 seconds. That was what she had left by the time the full picture assembled itself. Sung-min as the messenger, Jin-soo as the architect, Petra as the instrument, and Kang-ho sitting at the head of the table with his hand moving toward a glass that had been designed specifically for him. 10 seconds and only 2 options. Irie had never been a person who froze. Not in her graduate lab when an experiment produced a result that threatened 3 months of work. Not on the floor of a midtown hotel bar when a guest coded and nobody else moved. Freezing, her graduate supervisor used to say, was what happened when the brain insisted on certainty before action. The problem was that certainty, in real conditions, almost never arrived on time. You moved with the best information available, or you didn't move at all. She ran option 1. Lean toward Kang-ho, low voice, 4 words. Don't touch that glass. Clean, direct. But Jin-soo was 4 feet away, already tracking time, already positioned. A whispered warning reached Kang-ho, and then what? Jin-soo moves. The room moves. And Irie becomes the variable that needs to be removed before she can say another word. Option 1 got her neutralized before it helped anyone. She ran option 2, the redirect. A bartender's correction, smooth, practiced, readable as nothing more than a service adjustment. It put the clean glass in Kang-ho's hand and the compromised one in hers. It exposed nothing about what she knew. It gave Jin-soo no confirmed reason to move against her. Not immediately. The risk in option 2 was not the move itself. The risk was what came after, the moment Sung-min registered the switch and understood that someone behind the bar had seen exactly what he'd done. That moment was coming regardless. She couldn't stop it. She could only decide which side of it she wanted to be standing on. She adjusted the tray in her hands, took the last 3 steps to the table, and chose. She set the tray down like she owned the table. Not with force, with the quiet authority of someone who had spent years learning that the most powerful thing a person could do in a dangerous room was move like they belonged in it. No hesitation, no apology in her posture, just a bartender doing her job with the kind of precision that made people look through her instead of at her. That was the whole point. Her left hand brought the clean glass forward in a single fluid arc, the bartender's redirect, a motion she had performed so many thousands of times it lived in her muscle memory rather than her conscious mind. Smooth, natural, the kind of movement that read as correction rather than intervention. Her right hand caught the first glass by the rim. The exchange took less time than a blink. Kang-ho's fingers had just released the original glass, a half-second gap, the width of a breath, and Irie filled it with the clean one before his hand fully lifted. The spiked glass was in her palm and off the table before the weight of it even registered in the room. "My apologies, Mr. Shin. Chip in the glass. House standard, we don't serve imperfection at Velour." Her voice came out exactly right, smooth as the jazz overhead, unbothered, carrying the specific register of a professional correcting a minor oversight rather than a woman who had just calculated the difference between a living man and a dead one and acted on it in under 3 seconds. Kang-ho looked at her. She had expected the look, had prepared herself for it on the walk across the room, but preparation and reality were two different things. His eyes moved over her face with the slow, deliberate attention of someone reading a document in a language they knew fluently but had not expected to find here. He wasn't startled. He wasn't suspicious. He was cataloging. She held the look without flinching, without explanation, without the micro-collapse in expression that happened when people felt seen by someone they hadn't given permission to see them. He picked up the clean glass. Drank. The room exhaled, without knowing it had been holding its breath. Irie turned back toward the bar with the spiked glass in her right hand, her pace unhurried, her face carrying nothing. She set it 2 inches from her left hand on the bar top and did not look at it again. From the far edge of her peripheral vision, she felt Sung-min beak go still. Not the stillness of a man at rest, the stillness of a man recalculating. He knew. The jazz kept playing. The ice kept melting. Across the room, Kang-ho swirled his glass once slowly and spoke without looking up. "What is your name?" "Irie," she said. "Irie Thorne." He nodded, that single, deliberate nod that didn't mean acknowledgement. It meant filed. "Don't go far tonight." She just saved a man's life with one hand and held the evidence of it in the other, and he doesn't even know it yet. The ones who stayed this long already know this story is different. Subscribe. Because the moment he finds out the full truth about Irie Thorne, nothing in this story will ever look the same again. Ruben Casello stood up slowly. Not with anger, that was the thing that made every nerve in Irie's body tighten. Angry men were readable. Angry men announced themselves, gave you something to track and prepare for. Casello rose from his seat with the measured, deliberate calm of a man doing arithmetic, running numbers on a situation that had just changed and arriving at a new answer without visible disturbance. He straightened his jacket, crossed to Kang-ho's side of the table. The room shifted almost imperceptibly. 2 of Casello's men adjusted their posture without moving from their seats. Kang-ho's associates went very still. The temperature of the space dropped by degrees that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Casello leaned down and spoke quietly near Kang-ho's ear. Irie couldn't hear the words, but she read the geometry of it, the angle of Casello's body, the specific neutrality of his expression, the way his eyes moved once toward the bar and then deliberately away. He wasn't reporting a problem. He was presenting an adjusted position. The body language of a man who had expected one outcome, received another, and was already operating inside the revision. Kang-ho listened without expression. When Casello finished, Kang-ho said something in Korean. Short, final, the tone of a man issuing a decision that had already processed through every relevant calculation and arrived fully formed. 2 of his men moved immediately. Not toward Casello. Toward Sung-min Beek. Sung-min's chair scraped back 1/2 inch, an involuntary reaction, the body responding to threat before the mind caught up, and then he went completely still. The specific stillness of a man understanding that movement would only confirm what stillness might delay. It didn't matter. The confirmation had already arrived. Kang-ho had not looked at Sung-min once. He didn't need to. The instruction had been delivered and received, and now it was simply a matter of the room rearranging itself around a decision that couldn't be undone. Irie watched from behind the bar with her hands flat on the surface, and her breathing controlled. The thing that unsettled her was not Sung-min being walked quietly toward the door. It was Kang-ho's reaction to all of it. He wasn't surprised. A man who had just narrowly escaped something permanent, who had just watched a trusted associate get removed from his table, should have registered at least the shadow of shock. Some fracture in the composure, however small. There was nothing, which meant one of two things. Either Kang-ho Shin had already known something was coming, or he had known far more than that, and tonight had simply been confirmation. Irie wasn't sure which answer frightened her more. The room emptied the way dangerous rooms always emptied, quickly, quietly, and without explanation. Casello's men filed out first, then Kang-ho's associates, then the security personnel, repositioning themselves outside the private room's entrance with the practiced efficiency of people who had cleared spaces before and understood that what happened next required an audience of exactly 0. What remained was Kang-ho Shin, Di-young Pyo, 2 trusted security, and Irie Thorne standing behind a bar with a spiked glass 2 inches from her left hand. Kang-ho approached the bar slowly. He looked at the glass, didn't touch it, studied it the way Irie studied compounds, clinically, without emotion, extracting information from observation alone. His eyes moved over the surface tension, the meniscus, the way the light caught the liquid at its edge. Then he looked at Irie with the same quality of attention. You identified it from the surface tension. Not a question. A conclusion delivered by a man who had already run the logic and arrived at the only answer that fit. Yes, she said. How long did you have? 40 seconds, maybe less. He absorbed this without reaction, set both hands flat on the bar top, and looked at her with those filing cabinet eyes that didn't just see, they audited. Who sent you? He asked quietly. The air in the room changed. Irie held his gaze. Nobody sent me, I work here. Everyone in this building works here, he said. That's not what I asked. She understood then what she was looking at from his side of the bar. A black woman with a biochemistry background, placed in his orbit 6 weeks before an assassination attempt, who had identified a near-invisible compound from surface tension alone and executed a glass switch with the fluid precision of someone trained for exactly that movement. From his position, coincidence wasn't an available conclusion. Di-young recruited me from a cocktail competition, she said. I took the job because the salary was real and my loans were worse. That's the complete story. Kang-ho looked at Di-young. Something passed between them. Not words, not gesture, just the specific quality of silence that existed between 2 people who had already had a version of this conversation before she was in the room. Di-young's jaw tightened by a fraction. And Irie understood, with the slow, cold clarity of a result arriving from an experiment she hadn't known she was running, that she had just stepped into the center of something that had been constructed long before tonight. Di-young had not recruited her for her skill behind a bar. He had recruited her because Kang-ho had already received intelligence that a move was coming from inside his organization, and he had needed someone with exactly her profile, in exactly that room, on exactly this night. Someone who could see what trained eyes had been positioned not to see. Someone with no history inside the Shin collective, no allegiances, no reason to look away. She had not stumbled into this job. She had been placed here, and the man standing across the bar from her had known it from the moment she said yes. She let the silence sit for a moment. Not because she didn't have words, she had plenty, but because she had spent enough time in rooms with precise people to understand that the first person to fill a silence was the first person to surrender ground. And Irie Thorne had not survived everything she had survived by surrendering ground. Jin-soo, she said finally. He checked his watch 3 times in 60 seconds during service. He wasn't checking the time. The room went very still. Kang-ho did not react visibly. He was too disciplined for visible reaction, too many years of building a face that gave nothing away regardless of what moved beneath it. But something passed through his eyes, not surprise, not even anger. Confirmation. The door that had opened 1 inch on the 4th Thursday, when he had looked at her and said waste and turned away, opened completely now. She could see it in the microscopic shift of his posture, the way his shoulders settled a 1/4 inch lower, The specific exhale of a man whose suspicion has just been handed back to him as fact. 11 years. Jin-soo had been inside his operation for 11 years, present for every significant decision, every rotation, every room that required absolute trust. Kang-ho picked up his clean glass and finished what remained in it slowly, set it down without sound. "And Sungmin?" he asked. "A messenger," Irie said. "Someone gave him the instruction and the access. He didn't build this." "No," Kang-ho said quietly. "He didn't." Another silence. Longer this time. The kind that had weight to it, the weight of a man processing not just a betrayal, but the full architecture of how it had been constructed around him without his knowledge. Then he looked at her with an expression she hadn't seen on his face before. Not the cataloging look. Not the cold assessment of a man filing information for later use. Something quieter than that. Something that sat below the power and the precision and the 11 years of building a face that gave nothing away. "You are not just a bartender," he said. "No," she agreed. "But I was never trying to be anything else to you. I didn't switch that glass because of who you are. I switched it because I watched someone put something in it, and I was the only person in the room who saw it." He studied her for a long time. The jazz had stopped. Somewhere in the building, a door closed. The ice in his empty glass continued its slow, silent work. "That," Kang-ho Shin said softly, "is either the most honest thing anyone has said to me in years." He paused. "Or the most well-constructed lie." Velour recovered the way expensive things always recovered from damage. Quietly, efficiently, without leaving evidence that anything had required recovery at all. Jin-soo was escorted out through the building's service corridor by two men whose job description had no official title, but whose purpose required no explanation. He left without resistance. That was the part Irie couldn't stop turning over, not the removal itself, but the absence of protest. No argument, no performance of innocence. Just a man who had been caught inside a plan that had failed, accepting the consequence with the resignation of someone who had always known this was one of the possible endings. Sungmin was simply gone. No escort, no visible exit. One moment he existed at the edge of the room, and the next the space he had occupied was just space. In this world, Irie was learning, disappearance was its own specific language. It said everything that needed to be said without requiring a single word. The jazz resumed at 11:47 p.m. Di-young found her at the bar 20 minutes later, restocking with the mechanical focus of someone who needed her hands to be doing something specific while her mind processed everything else. He stood beside her without preamble. "You weren't supposed to know why you were placed here." "I know," she said. "Does it change anything?" She thought about that honestly. About the 40 seconds and the surface tension and the decision she had made before she fully understood the architecture she was standing inside. About whether the knowledge that she had been positioned rather than chosen altered the weight of what she had done. "It changes how I think about the job," she said. "It doesn't change what I did." Di-young was quiet for a moment. Then, and this was the thing that reordered everything, he said. "He suspected me. Before tonight, I need you to understand that. Kang-ho placed you in this room partly to watch how I moved under pressure. Your catching Sungmin didn't just save his life." He straightened his jacket. "It proved mine." Irie set down the bottle in her hand, very carefully. She had walked into this room, tonight believing she was a bartender, who had noticed something terrible and acted on it. She was only now beginning to understand how many people had been watching her do it. He came back to the bar alone. It was past midnight. The private room had been cleared, the remaining staff quietly redirected to other floors. And Velour had settled into the particular hush of a space that had absorbed something significant and was now pretending it hadn't. Kang-ho moved through that hush without disturbing it, the way he moved through every room, like the space had been expecting him and had adjusted accordingly. He set a sealed envelope on the bar top. Irie looked at it, didn't touch it. "What's inside isn't adequate," he said, But it's the language I have for this kind of situation. I don't want it, she said. He waited. With Kang-ho Shin, she was learning, silence was never empty. It was an active thing, a held space where he allowed the other person to fill in what came next, studying what they chose to put there. I want information, she said. Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise, she doubted this man experienced surprise in any conventional sense. More like the specific alertness of someone who has just heard an unexpected note in a familiar piece of music and is adjusting their attention accordingly. Information, he repeated. About a funding collapse, she said. Graduate research program, 3 years ago. I was told it was a budget decision. I have never believed that. She watched his face as she continued. The logistics contract attached to the research facility that lost our funding was rerouted 18 months later to a company registered in Seoul. I found that 2 years ago. I've been waiting for someone who had the reach to tell me why. The filing cabinet eyes went very still. Not the stillness of a man caught off guard. The stillness of a man who has just found an unexpected variable in a calculation he thought he had already completed and is running the numbers again from the beginning. You've known this for 2 years, he said slowly, and you still switched that glass tonight. Those are 2 separate things, she said. He looked at her for a long time, longer than the cataloging look, longer than the assessment. This was something else, the look of a man standing at the edge of a conclusion he hadn't expected to reach tonight, turning it over carefully before he committed to its weight. You held that information for 2 years, he said. You didn't use it as leverage. You didn't approach anyone. You simply waited. I waited, she confirmed, because I didn't have the right door yet. And tonight. Tonight, she said, you opened it. Another silence, the longest one yet. Somewhere above them, the building breathed its quiet, expensive breath. Then Kang-ho Shin picked up the sealed envelope and placed it back inside his jacket. I'll need 3 days, he said. He straightened his cuffs, turned toward the exit. Stopped. Miss Thorne. Yes. The door cuts both ways. He walked out without looking back. She held that secret for 2 years. 2 years. And she still saved his life without using it as a weapon. Drop one word in the comments that describes Ireie Thorne right now. Just one. I'll be reading every single one, and the word most people choose is going to say everything about why this story hit different. She walked out of velour at 3 a.m. into air that felt like it had been waiting for her. Cold, still, the kind of quiet that only existed in cities between the hours when the last dangerous thing had finished and the first ordinary thing hadn't yet begun. The street was empty in both directions. A single streetlight threw a pale circle on the wet pavement 20 feet ahead of her and stopped. Ireie stood on the sidewalk and didn't move for a long time. She thought about a sealed envelope sitting back inside a jacket pocket, about a man who had spent 11 years earning a position close enough to matter, and had used every one of those years to build something that ended tonight in a service corridor without a single word of protest. She thought about Sung-min Beek, who had wanted so badly to be trusted that he had made himself useful to the wrong person. About Petra, who had been handed an instruction and followed it, probably without knowing what she was carrying. She thought about Di-young, standing beside her at the bar with his jaw tight, telling her that her decision tonight had cleared his name inside a suspicion she hadn't known existed. Everyone in that room had been playing a version of this game. Only one of them had walked in without knowing the rules. Her grandmother used to say that the most dangerous person in any room was not the loudest one, not the most armed one, not even the most powerful one. It was the person who had nothing to perform, no position to protect, no version of themselves to maintain for the benefit of the people watching. Baby, she used to say, the one with nothing to prove is the one nobody sees coming. Ireie had spent her entire adult life being underestimated by rooms that never considered her a variable. Professors who questioned her funding before her results. Clients who looked past her to the bartender behind her. Men who built elaborate plans inside spaces they assumed were controlled. because they had never once looked at the person serving their drinks and asked what she actually knew. That invisibility had cost her things, real things, a career, a program, 3 years of recalculation and waiting and holding information she couldn't yet use. Tonight it had saved a man's life. She didn't feel triumphant. Triumph was for people who had finished something. What she felt was the specific, clarifying weight of a person who has just understood, fully, finally, without remainder, exactly what they are and what they are capable of. The door cuts both ways. She knew what that meant. She had known the moment he said it. Whatever Kang Ho Shin found in those 3 days would open something between them that neither of them would be able to close again. She started walking. The streetlight held its pale circle on the pavement ahead. She walked straight through it and kept going. She walked out of the most dangerous room on the East Coast with nothing but the truth and her grandmother's voice in her head, and she was the only one who left with more power than she came in with. If this story found you, it found you for a reason. Subscribe. Because Ireie Thorne's story is only just beginning, and the next room she walks into will change everything you thought you knew about who holds the real power.